Welcome to the Workplace Podcast. We've got an incredible guest today, and I'm really excited for the insights and ideas they'll be sharing. There are so many practical learnings from the conversation that will make a difference to you, your team, or organization. If your organization is interested in a workshop on this topic of the podcast, feel free to get in touch via our website, yellowwood.ie. If you want to support our podcast, and you'll find a link to our Patreon in the podcast description. Thanks in advance for listening and your support. Now, let's take a different path to success. Welcome to the Workplace Podcast. Joining me today to discuss her book, Leadership Unblocked, Break Through the Beliefs That Limit Your Potential, is Muriel Wilkins. Muriel is the founder and CEO of Parvis Partners, is a sought-after C-suite advisor and executive coach with a 20-year track record of helping senior leaders take their performance to the next level. She is the co-author of Own the Room, Discover Your Signature Voice to Master Your Leadership Presence. Muriel is also the host of the Harvard Business Review podcast, Coaching Real Leaders, consistently ranked as a top 10 podcast in Apple's management category. Muriel, welcome to the Workplace Podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great, William. Really happy to be here with you.
So Muriel, the first time I met you was at Thinkers 50. You had spotted a photo that I had posted on LinkedIn with your book, which is littered with sticky notes.
Yeah.
And you took a picture of me with Amy Gallo and Maura Erin Melez and Anne Morris at Thinkers 50. And I was sitting beside you and I thought, like, excuse the reference now, squad goals. I was like, this is it. I thought it was the best thing ever. And we got to chat then all the way through about your book and all that. What a fantastic book.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, it was a pleasure just to meet you, to be honest. I have to be honest, I saw your LinkedIn post with those books and the stickies, and I was like, who is this man? Who has read so thoroughly, because so many people say they'll read your book, but to actually thoroughly go through it and take notes and sticky, like that is music to my heart. And then we sat down next to each other serendipitously, and yes, we chatted about the book, but we chatted about so much more, which to me is just the value of human connection. So it was just a pleasure meeting you, and I can foresee that we'll probably have many more chats in the future.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. And you know what? Can I just say just about the book then? Because we did actually really connect about lots of different things. You've got twins, I'm a twin, different things like that. So it was genuinely lovely to have some chats and conversations with you. I'm here to promote this book, and the reason why I love this book, for so many different reasons, from a personal point of view, from a leadership development perspective, but also I'm really interested in conflict resolution and making that accessible to people. And this is why I think this book is really good, because what you do in this book is it's great for self-understanding of those shadow behaviors, or those blockers as you call them. And especially it's that practical fixes, how to fix them. So this is really good if you're trying to understand yourself and others. And then it's the signs, the costs, how others may see you, the root causes of them, which I think is brilliant. And then we'll talk about this further on down the line, is to, like, you educate me in so many different ways that I haven't been seen before, like the different types of perfectionists and the maladaptive ones. And this is why I think if you are a coach, you're a senior leader, a manager, a mediator, this is the book for you, because not only is it practical, and then what I thought was fascinating, I said this to you at Thinkers 50, was you've transcripts of your coaching conversations, right? And I thought that was really good to give people an insight into your style. And it really, I think the coaching sheets at the end are excellent. So this is the last thing I'll say about the book then, is I think it will help resolve a lot of conflicts in the workplace, because what you do is allow people to take responsibility for their own shadow behavior. But also what you have in the book then is say, listen, if other people are struggling, here are some questions then to ask them. So listen, brilliant accomplishment. Well done, Muriel.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, William. And I love that you have framed it in terms of what it can do to help with conflict resolution. I think my aim with the book, and for so many years, I've helped others and even myself sort of try to figure out how to deal with conflict with other people, just in the nature of the work that they do as they lead. And I think this book and where I am now in terms of coaching others
Mhm.
is learn how to solve the conflict that you have with yourself
Yeah.
first before you aim to really master how to resolve conflict with others.
Yeah.
Because we really are our own laboratory. We have a whole system and organization that we
Yeah.
ourselves are. And if we don't know how to manage that, how to lead that, how to resolve within, how the heck do we figure out how to do it with others?
So I just got to go to the book, right? Because you talk about in
Mm,
the first opening section there of the book, you talk about your life partner, Arden,
mm,
right? And you were
mhm.
doing a lots of giving out and stuff like that. And then your Arden turns around and says, which I might say is very brave.
Yeah,
Maybe
he does not lack in bravery and courage. I will say fear does not exist in his demeanor or vocabulary.
so. I must say, I laughed at this, right? Did you ever think the problem might be you? I think that is such a brave thing to say and a courageous thing. And that's the whole thing about this book. Then it gives you language to say, and through your coaching style, you can see that
Mhm.
there's these risks that people take to say, listen, to something I think that would really benefit you. It's difficult.
Yeah,
Is there
yeah, no,
something about
absolutely.
that?
No, there is. And I think, I do talk at the beginning of the book and share the story around how for most of my life, not like any other high achievers. And I give myself grace and I give my clients grace. I think when you are a high achiever, a high performer for most of your life, you've learned to do that by somehow controlling and making things happen outside of you, right? Like,
Yeah.
and you really are under this illusion, again, myself included, that I am the master of the context and
Hmm.
can make anything happen. And then what tends to happen, that's what happened to me, that's what happens with other leaders, is they hit a wall where they recognize or they don't recognize that what they're trying to do on the outside is not necessarily working anymore. But there's a huge resistance to then turning inward. And I think when I was faced with that, this was a couple of decades ago,
Yeah.
in a senior level role where I was really having I was achieving the business results, but I was really experiencing a lot of pain in
Yeah.
dealing with my peers in particular. And I was complaining about it every single night. And yes, my partner then looked at me one day, and just said, listen, like, I hear you talking about all these other people all the time and what they should be doing and all that. But like, did you ever think that maybe you're the issue? And William, I have to be honest, like in that moment, I was very resistant. I was very defensive. I was like, absolutely not. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. But that message stayed with me, right? And it took me a couple of years to finally take action on it, which is to say, okay, let me actually look at myself. And so in a coaching conversation with my clients, we can accelerate that. And I think the reason we can accelerate it is because A, they already are recognizing that something is off. And
Yeah.
two, I don't have any skin in the game with them.
Yeah.
So I can be very direct, in saying that, and that's what they want me to be, right? So there's a certain level of neutrality that allows them to receive the message a bit differently than maybe they might, where there isn't that quote unquote psychological safety that's necessary for one to be able to hear that type of straightforwardness.
So let's unpack blockers a little bit, right? So I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
maybe say what my understanding is, because a lot of people may not understand what do you actually mean by that.
Yeah.
So these
Mm-hmm.
hidden blockers are like limiting beliefs, assumptions, cognitive distortions, life scripts, just like the stories that we tell ourselves, shadow behaviors
Mm-hmm.
that are holding us back. Is that what you mean by a blocker?
Yeah, so I definitely make a difference between the belief and the behavior, right? And
Mm,
so the behavior is what we see, it's the way we act out, it's what we
yeah,
do. The hidden blockers, which are beliefs, are the ones that come that then drive the behavior. They're kind of what people refer to as your internal operating system. And I didn't make any of this up, right? I mean, this is
yeah,
grounded in eons of psychology, wisdom teachings, etc. I just am trying to make the language a little bit more palatable from a leadership realm. And so they are assumptions that we make. And what are assumptions? I mean, assumptions are literally, I like to keep things really real and simple. They're a guess, they're a hypothesis around what's happening. They
Yeah.
aren't necessarily grounded in facts and truth. And so really what I'm trying to get to is, if they are so malleable, which they are, the research bears it out, we actually have a choice in terms of what assumptions, just like when we operate a business, we have assumptions around what we are driving the budget based on, what our strategy is going to be. Well, the same happens from a leadership standpoint. If I can recognize that I have a choice in terms of the assumptions that I bring to the table, which will then inform how I behave, and how I behave will then inform the results that I get, shouldn't I pay attention then to the assumptions that I'm bringing into any particular context so that they are really aligned with the outcomes that I want?
So we're going to give people a flavor of the common ones, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So like it's like, I need to be involved, I need it done
Yes.
now, I know I'm right, I can't make a mistake. If I can do it, you can do it. I can't say no, or I
Yes.
don't belong here. And that's the thing about this book then, is you might have several, but I think you make the point is you're going to have a primary blocker. Like for me, it
Yeah.
might be I
Yeah.
can't
And
say no.
that's right. And so the seven are the ones that I saw as most common when I looked across the universe of, I took a sample of 300 clients that I had coached over the past 20 years. And those were the common ones that came up. That is not to say that they are the only blockers that can get,
Mm.
or beliefs that can get in the way of a leader leading effectively. But those tend to be pretty common in what I see, particularly for leaders who want to scale up, right? Or who want to be more effective in their role. The premise is, if you can identify one, if you can work through one, then you can do the same. It's rinse and repeat
Yeah.
for any other that comes up. And the goal here is not that you're one and done. It's that you keep this as part of your leadership way of operating, that you're constantly being mindful of, what are the assumptions that I'm bringing in, what are the beliefs that I'm bringing in, and which ones might be getting in the way of me getting to the results that I want, and let me recalibrate in the process that I show in the book. So, but what I do often recommend is start with one, right? Start with the
Yeah.
one that is causing potentially the most pain in the moment, and work on that one first.
And this is another thing about the book, which I thought was really powerful, if I'm honest, Muriel, was the understanding, well, why is it I do this? It's the root cause. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's a
Yeah.
childhood belief, or it's a fear or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like, once you understand it, you kind of go, now I know why I do it. It's a bit like you name it to tame it, isn't it?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think, by the way, like, I'm not a therapist, so this is not
Yeah.
about healing. I
Yeah.
very much see therapy as a profession of healing, right? Where you are so stuck because of traumatic events or things that happened in the past that you can't move forward. I see coaching much more as a planning profession. Let me take you from where you are today and figure out how you want to get to where you want to be tomorrow. And so it's informed by what's happened, but we're not going to go back and try to heal from what's happened in the past. That said, I think in order to understand why you have the beliefs that you have today, you might want to understand where they come from, not so that you can beat yourself up or try to fix them in any way or even let them go. It's actually so that, it's just like a friend. Like, if you're friendly with somebody, you will see them when they're coming across the hall. Like you and I met, now
Yeah.
if I were to see you at an airport coming down, I would be like, oh my God, there's William. Let me go greet him and talk to him and treat him like a friend, and know what I need to how I need to engage with you, rather than like not even recognize when you show up. And
Yeah.
so much of this is a part of awareness, understanding where these beliefs come from, allow you to befriend them in that way. And ultimately, what they also show is that there's nothing wrong with you for having these beliefs. I think this is very important. Why? For two reasons. One, these beliefs came about because they are what made you successful up until a certain point. That's why you've held them around for so long, and why they've become habitual. The second is that, I have to tell my clients a lot of times, like, you're not that special. We all as human beings have three fundamental needs, even if you're the CEO of a company. The first is to feel worthy. The second is to feel connected and like you belong. And the third is to feel safe. Now, how we interpret all those three things and how we get them met is different. But a lot of our beliefs are there to make us feel those three things. And so understanding when I'm in the position of, oh my gosh, I need to be involved, I have to be involved in these micro levels of management.
Yeah.
Why? It might be because I'm not feeling safe, meaning I'm feeling like if I'm not involved at this level, all hell's going to break loose and maybe I'll
Yeah.
lose my job. And I start going down this spiral, which really there is no evidence of. And so tapping into that and understanding that maybe the need that I'm thinking it's going to fill is actually not a real need at that moment can often help release, right? I had a situation earlier today where somebody asked me to do something and I could feel myself like tightening up, right? Like feeling angst about it, even though it was a very small request. Now,
Yeah.
years ago, I would have just said yes, right? So this comes to the belief of I can't say no. And I would have just said yes. But I recognize something is up. I could feel that I needed to say yes, even though I really wanted to say no. And I very quickly was able to say, in this moment right now, I'm fearing disappointing this person, which really comes from this need for connection. And
Yeah.
so then the problem solution became, how can I say no and stay true to actually what I think is right and not feel like I'm losing connection at the same
Yeah.
time? And so it reframed the way that I responded. And, the person wrote back and basically was like, okay, you know, versus me, saying yes and then feeling bad about it for the next couple of weeks, or saying no in a way that didn't also respect that I do want to have a healthy, productive relationship with this individual.
And that's where, if I remember in that section of the book, which I should, I've highlighted it. Is it something to do with, the roots of this is to do with, acts of service in the family growing up and that sense of belonging and am I
Yeah,
remembering
I mean, it
correctly?
could, right? Everyone's story is different. And so I think the real work, and this is why I'm not very prescriptive in the book around here is why you have this
Mm,
belief, right? I give ideas, right?
yeah.
Suggestions, sort
Yeah.
of appetizers to trigger your thinking.
Mm,
But because all of our stories are different, the rationale behind the belief is going to be different, right? For
yeah.
me, this desire to say yes does come from being
Yeah.
in a family where there was almost a sense of obligation, right? That you put family first. You do not say no. I mean, in psychological terms, they would say we were very enmeshed with each other, right?
Yeah.
To this day. And so there was this notion of saying no to anyone in my family was blasphemy, right? You
Mm,
just say yes. And I understand where it comes from now, and I can hold it, with grace. But what I have to be careful is understanding that that doesn't mean that that's the way it needs to be with everybody, right?
yeah.
Outside of family, that's the danger. So it can come from family, it can come from your boss, it can come from a lot of this
Yeah.
comes from early experience academically in terms of how we were praised and
Yeah.
rewarded. It comes from society and what they expect of us. It comes from work, the context that you're in at work. So it comes from a
Mm.
lot of different places. And I think part of this is everyone doing the work to really identify where does it come from for me? And that's what you work with rather than where it comes from for others.
And that's what you're doing in this book is just signposting people to say it might be this, or in your own terms, the appetizer there. And also what I like is there's internal and external signs
Mm,
of what it might be. So it might be a performance review, or you feel like you're stuck in your career or something like that. I might be
yeah.
feeling a bit of pressure at work as well. So the internal,
Yeah.
external signs.
Yeah, because a lot of people ask, well, how do I know that I even have that I'm blocked? Right? Like,
Yeah.
how do I
Yeah.
even know? Like, let's start there. And
Yeah.
what I share is whenever you feel some dissonance, and what is dissonance? Well, there's a difference between what you want to have happen and what is happening, right? And there are internal and external cues for that. The
Yeah.
external cues are things like you suggested. If I get feedback and I look at the feedback and I'm like, that's not the feedback that I want, or my team is not performing in the way that I would like them to perform, or I walk out of a
Yeah.
meeting and I'm like, that is not the way I wanted to show up in that meeting. Like, why did I get so upset? Or why did I not present in a confident way? There's a dissonance between what you want to have happen, or how you want to show up, or however you want, or how you want to lead, and what's actually happening. Those are external cues. The internal cues is kind of what I described earlier, right? It's when you feel it on the inside. So nothing had necessarily changed on the outside for me when this person made a request, but I could feel on the inside like this sense of I wasn't calm anymore. There was a little bit of angst. And the point here, that's the cue that a lot of people miss. It
Yeah.
feels like frustration. It feels like disengagement. It feels like burnout. It feels like anxiety. All these terms that we hear, we don't pay attention to it. And the paying attention to it is literally just taking a second and asking yourself, what is it that's happening that's making me feel this right now? What's happening, right? And that then really is what you can then ascertain. Is there a difference between how I want to respond to what's happening here and how I'm actually feeling in the way that I respond? If so, there's dissonance. So those are the differences between the internal and external cues. A lot of times we rely on the external, but I think those who really evolve as leaders are able to recognize the internal cues before it starts manifesting externally and everyone else can see it.
And I think that's the important piece of leadership development, isn't it? Just listening to those
Yes,
internal cues, because we have a lifetime of these cognitive habits and behaviors and the ways of thinking then that this is actually what's getting in the way of our own potential
that's
and our
right.
success.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
And then to do that, then you have a roadmap then where you
Yes,
uncover and unpack and unblock then. So, and this is what's really helpful in the book then is like you'll tell a story or you'll give an insight, you give the signs, you'll give the cost to it. And I think the cost to it are, if this is the pain, you're actually saying in black and white, this is the pain, this is the cost to you. And I
mm-hmm.
think that helps motivate people to say, do you realize this is what you're doing? And then you
Yeah,
give actions then, or maybe reflection questions to do instead. And that's the practicality of this book that I
yeah,
really like, Muriel, is okay, here's what you can do instead. So we'll say, for example, that people pleasing or the not saying no is take a pause a
mm-hmm.
moment. I might say,
Yeah,
listen, I'll get
yeah,
back to you on that, or something, to buy yourself time.
that's
Um,
right.
so
That's
can you
right.
talk us through that roadmap then for people?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me take a step back around like why have a roadmap. The
Mm,
first is fundamentally, yes, I'm an executive coach. I get paid for what I do, but I really want to work myself out of a job. Like I believe that we all have the capacity to learn how to coach ourselves. We just have not been taught how to do it,
yeah.
or learn to trust it. And so when I work with my clients, my goal is to get them to a place where, and they'll say, oh my gosh, I can hear you. And I'm like, no, you're not hearing me. You're hearing you coach yourself. That's what's happening. And so my goal with providing a roadmap is so that folks can build the capacity to coach themselves, which will also enable them to build the capacity to coach those who they lead. So that's number one. I think number two is when you're able to have a roadmap like this, you recognize that the solution is not just moving to action. So you gave the example of if you're somebody who has the belief, I can't say no, right? And you end up
Yeah.
looking like a people pleaser. The
Yeah.
tendency and what we tend to see all, in articles and social media is move to action, draw boundaries, right? And here are the three ways to say no, you know, and those are great, but they're kind of not sustainable. They're sort of a flash in the pan tips that I can implement today. But then how about tomorrow and the day after and the day after when you find
Yeah.
yourself right back? You haven't really dug. What you've done is basically just put, grass on top of the soil, but new grass on top of the soil, but not gotten into the soil to say, well, what is going on with the soil that I keep growing weeds every spring instead of nice
Mm,
grass, right? I'd rather we deal with that. I want you to have nice grass every spring. And so with that, it's the road. So you want to go back to the beginning, which is this roadmap of starting with uncovering what's blocking you first, which is accepting the reality of what's happening, which is the dissonance,
mm,
naming the belief. Then you can move to unpack it, which is what we talked about around understanding where that belief
yeah.
comes from. and being curious about it. And then you can move on to the part that we love, which is the action, which is the unblock, which really is around reframing the belief. And then based on reframing it, how does that then drive a new behavior or a new action in that particular circumstance?
So people are seeing the internal signs, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in coaching, they're giving feedback, and it's the external signs
Yeah.
that are there, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, if I'm listening here and I have a blind spot or I have a fear to reflect, kind of going,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know it's a bit like Pandora's box. I don't know what's
Mm-hmm.
going to be uncovered. How would you reassure people that actually coaching yourself or engaging a coach like yourself and myself, Muriel, like, why should I do this? Is it worth the effort? Like,
Yeah. Is
how
it
do I
worth the effort? I
overcome that
mean,
fear?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very real question, William. And I love that you asked it because I think at the end of the day, this isn't for everybody, and that's okay, right? Like, I think there has to be a level of readiness. And the readiness is, do you want to lead in a different way? Do you want
Mm,
to experience leadership in a different way? I go back to my story at the beginning when my
mm,
partner said, "Did you ever think the problem is you and not them?" He said it, I heard it, but I wasn't ready for that because I
yeah.
really didn't move on it till a couple of years later. And that's okay, right? Like there's a saying, right? The teacher will be there wherever you are. The
Yeah.
question is, are you ready to learn? Are you ready to be the student? And so this is where, from a coaching standpoint, it comes down to coachability. And sounds a little blasphemous in the coaching world, but I don't believe that everyone is coachable at
Yeah.
every particular time, right? The moment has to be right. And when the moment is right is when they want something different. If you don't want something different, then it's not the right time. And that's okay. So if I work with someone and they get feedback and it says, let's say you're a micromanager and you do this, and they say, look, there's no other way that I can be and I want to be, and this is the way it's going to be. I'm like, then we don't need to do any coaching, right?
Yeah.
Come back if you want to do something different. But if you want to keep doing the same, there's no reason for us to be in a coaching conversation. It's a different type of conversation. And so the same goes with coaching yourself. If you're not ready to want something different and then to go through the work to do that, then that's fine. Put the book away, come back to it another time,
Yeah.
and revisit, right? Whenever you think. What I will say, though, is that if there is a lesson for you to learn, it's going to come back around. That there's no doubt about it. Like that is just the way it works. Whether you are, again, a CEO or a first time associate,
Yeah.
it will come back. And really, it's coming back asking, are you now ready? And you have every choice in the world to say yes or no. And if you say yes, then you do the type of work that we're talking about.
I love that. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
That's
And
right.
also something they said about the willingness there. When I did my coach training, it was about, is the person ready, willing, and able, as in, do they have the capacity? And sometimes it is to do with the moment is right, is sometimes there's so much work pressure or life
Mm,
pressure or family pressure, whatever is going on, that they simply do not have the headspace to
yeah.
reflect. And it's that capacity to piece. Are they able? And I think
Yeah.
that's where you need to ask yourself is how do I give myself that space to really reflect? And it's about pace as well, isn't it? You need to slow
Yeah.
down a little bit just
A
to
little bit,
really
a little bit. I
reflect.
mean, look, I'm somebody who, kind of lives for efficiency. So,
Yeah,
I do think that we have created this story that, the type of roadmap that we're talking about, or the type of work that, that reflection means slowing down. Like you have to be, you have to like
yeah,
stop everything to reflect.
yeah,
I don't necessarily buy that, right?
yeah,
I think you need to, so I'll give an example. I've practiced meditation for years now, but it has changed in form so many times because I started off with a very specific outcome, which is not what meditation is really about.
yeah,
And really one of the changes for me is when I recognize that, when you practice meditation, the power of it is not in the sitting and the meditation. Really, the meditation is throughout your day. Can you practice what you experience when you're sitting on that mat, right?
Yeah.
And so I see what we're talking about in really learning a framework that you can put into action every
Yeah.
single day at every given moment. It's very efficient. And so the pause for reflection, it does not mean that you know need to sort of pull back on your schedule, because guess what, most of this work, where it really takes action is when you are in the work, when you are doing the day-to-day
Yeah.
job of leading. That's where you get to see whether it works for you or not. So with my clients, I'm very big on the coaching itself is not going to be a heavy lift, right? Because most of what you're going to do, what most of the way that you're going to build these skills is going to be as you're doing your day-to-day work, right? And so, and then it becomes more sustainable and more integrated. And that's what we all want, rather than have it be this separate thing. You know, it's like when you go on vacation, right? Learning to relax only when you go on vacation. No, 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 no. I think really the magic is, how can you learn to have that calm and that ease and that
Yeah.
vacation kind of mindset, right?
Yeah.
Even when you're in the thick of it, you
Yeah.
know, that's where the beauty is, versus having to wait for that 1 week, 2 week, or a month, depending on where you live, where you've got to actually go someplace else to feel like you can be present. No, how can you learn to be present even when there's crisis around you? And I think this point of being able to be reflective even when in action is critical.
I was just about to make that point. It is about reflection in action, and that's where that self mastery comes into
Yeah,
place. There, where and it's a bit like you have mastered the art of listening to yourself to say something's not right here. I'm feeling that urge inside to
that's right.
say yes when really what I want to say no, and then it's tuning into yourself, or maybe being more objective, or whatever needs to happen in that leadership moment there. And I think that's the whole thing, is you're teaching people is to constantly do this for yourself. Then
Yes,
it's not, listen, it's a one and done. Let's reflect and then that's going to get me through the whole week. It's more like
yeah,
it's this continual practice of reflection and action that it becomes
that's right.
automatic, a bit like driving a car. Because it's an automatic habit or behavior, then you're you're able to do the two things at
That's
once,
right.
do your
That's right. And
job.
William, like, and
Mm.
this doesn't come from a place of like, you know, oh, it's just a nice to have, right? I think
Yeah,
this for me comes from a place of, when we look at what it means to mature as an individual, and we look at adult development theory, for example, the
yeah,
skills that you and I are talking about right now are along the, you know, the further end of the spectrum of maturing and developing as an adult. And so
yeah,
when I think about from a leadership perspective, what we want are leaders who also have matured along the lines of adult development, right?
yeah,
Where they are able, in the moment of crisis, or in the moment of running their organization, or in the moment of leading people, they are able to, as they're doing, also be reflective and recognize the choices that are in front of them in terms of the
yeah,
way that they are going to lead, because that's where transformation happens. And so my whole thing is, if these folks don't build the capacity to be able to do that for themselves, to transform themselves, how in the world can they transform a whole organization? How can they lead an organization so that that organization also understands at a systems level what their internal cues are, for that organization to understand what are the choices that are in front of us, right, strategically, for that
yeah,
organization to be able to understand what are the beliefs that we hold as a culture that we might need to change in order to be able to move forward. So there's a real, from my standpoint, a real business case for doing this work, but it starts with the individual, right? You cannot expect for the collective team. A lot of times I get called in, I'll work with our team to get aligned. And I'm like, if you're not aligned as an individual, how the heck do you get aligned as a team? And then how do you get aligned as an organization? So there's a ripple effect that I think can start with one individual as the leader, that then, you know, rolls out to the rest of the organization. And that's really what I'm trying to, the mission that it supports in terms of the ripple effect that this can cause.
so some of the hidden blockers then you were talking about, I need to be involved, I need it done now, I know I'm right, I can't make a mistake, right?
Hmm.
Um, and these are common things that I would see in leaders is they're sometimes they're saying, listen, I need to be involved all the time and you can't make a mistake. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's two things going on at the same time and they're getting burnt out and the whole identity is wrapped up, like Melissa Clark,
Yeah.
who we met at Thinkers 50, their
Mm.
whole identity is wrapped up in work. And
Yeah.
and then they're getting this sense of fulfillment from work where they're not really having a balanced way of getting their fulfillment from different parts of
Hmm.
life. And what advice would you give to people that are saying this and, I need to be involved, I have to get it right, I'm the expert or my way is the best way or whatever it is. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
what
I think
advice?
for any of them, there's a simple question, which is, what are the outcomes that you're looking to drive to for yourself? Is this the
Yeah,
way? Because if you're telling me, let's just take I need to be involved as one of them, right?
yeah,
If you're telling me on the one hand, I need to be involved, I have to be this deep in the weeds, et cetera. And on the other
yeah,
hand, you're saying to me, the leader that I want to be a strategic leader. I want to be at the table
yeah,
where we're making the high level strategic decisions. I want to be able to, by the time I close my laptop, at 7 p.m. or whatever hour, to really sort of disconnect for a couple of hours where I'm not thinking about it. I want to have space in my calendar. Let's get real tactical, right? I want to have space in my calendar where I can do that reflective strategic thinking and read through the industry journals and really think about what our strategic plan and visioning is. There's a dissonance between the two. That's what I go back to. So for me, I always tell my clients, like, no judgment. I will sleep well at night, you know. But if you're telling me this is what you want, and yet this is what you believe, the math is not mathing. We need the math to math. Okay.
yeah.
So it's one or the other. If you want to be in the weeds and you want your calendar packed all the time and not have time for the reflective thinking, and you want to be tactical and not strategic, hold on to the belief of I need to be involved in all the things. If what you want is to be strategic, is to have more time on your calendar, is to do all of those things, then the question becomes, what would the belief need to be that you need to have in order to align with that? And I leave that up to them to figure out what that is. And sometimes they'll come back, and one of the ones that they'll say is, okay, maybe if I said, I need to be involved in the areas where I add the most value, or I need to be involved in the things that are highest risk and
Mm.
most urgent, or I need to be involved. They frame it a little tightly, and then that then says, okay, well, if that's what you believe, then what would you do? What would you do differently? What would you do the same? And they notice that, oh, it would mean I wouldn't go to this meeting. It would mean I would tell my assistant that I have to have an hour every Friday morning where I'm doing X. It would mean I am going to take a 2 week vacation. It would mean these things. It would mean that I am going to start doing some of the work that fulfills me, which is volunteering at this nonprofit.
Mm.
And it opens up their choices. And that's what we want, right? It opens up their choices so that then they can decide, I can do this or I can do that. Which one is going to align most with what it is that I want for myself, for my team, for the organization? So that is the place for any of these that I would ask, what do you want? And based on that, that's where you start the work.
So Muriel, I'm listening in here as a leader, and listen, just give me a quick fix here. All right, I'm under time pressure. What's the
Mhm.
silver bullet here for me?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think there's any silver bullet to anything if you're at a leadership standpoint. Like, let's just be real,
Yeah,
and I think that's part of the issue is that, we put on the leadership hat, we take the leadership gig, we take the leadership responsibility, but we don't want all the stuff that comes with it, which is there are no quick fixes when it comes to leadership. Okay.
yeah,
And so part of where I'm a real truth teller with my clients, I'm like, you don't have to do this role.
yeah,
Nobody is forcing you. But if you take on this role, recognize that here's what comes along with it. That's what it means to be a leader. So if you're looking for a quick fix, this ain't it. This is not the role for you, or this is not the work. And the more that you can do some of the things that we're talking about, the more efficient it becomes because it just becomes part of your normal operating procedures. So the first thing, if somebody asks me, what is one thing that I can do? The
Yeah.
one thing that I will tell them is be curious. Be curious about why you're doing the things that you're doing. And not
Yeah.
just why you're doing the things that you're doing, but be curious about how am I thinking about the things that I'm doing? Because that's what starts uncovering these hidden beliefs. Okay. And you start recognizing, maybe the assumption that I'm making doesn't actually hold relative to the outcome. That's the one, like literally lighting the match that then triggers the rest of the process.
So we spoke earlier about coaching ourselves. What about
Mm-hmm.
coaching others then, especially if people are like, say, for example, that case where Arjun said to you, well, did you ever think you might be part of the problem there?
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes people might say, I would never dream to say anything as bold as that in the workplace. Like,
Right.
so it's more of that softer language here, isn't it? That this is, listen,
Yeah, I mean, I think context is everything,
yeah,
right? I mean, when Arden said that to me, we weren't working together. He probably
yeah,
was tired of hearing me complain every night, right? He's like, "Can we just watch TV? Like, why do I have to hear all these things?" And there was a level of trust, and he had no skin in the game. Like, really,
yeah.
he'd be like, "Look, you're going to keep working. I know who you are." Right? Like, he wasn't concerned that I would walk away from the relationship because he said
Yeah.
something like that. In the workplace, I think you have to meet people where they are. So there are some people that you could say that. I have somebody, my chief of staff is very straightforward with me. She would say something like that to me,
Yeah.
right? And she has. And there are others where you might have to go about it differently. You have to meet somebody where they are based on their readiness level, but also what is the language that's going to work best with them. So some ways that you could frame something like this is in a similar way that you could talk to yourself, is you could say, hey, when you were in that situation or you were in that meeting, or I kind of observed that you didn't speak up in that meeting. Like, what is it that you were thinking? What was going through your mind as you were in that meeting that kept you from speaking up? So you name the observation of the action, but you don't name the belief behind it, and you don't give a narrative, right? I'm not explaining why I think you didn't speak up. I'm letting that person own it. I'm asking the question so that they can take ownership over it. And if they come and say, well, it's because of what this person did, this person did, this person did, you can ask, well, like, in what way do you feel you contributed to you not speaking up? Or in what do you think is within your control that enables you to perhaps speak up in that situation?
Yeah.
So you don't absolve, and you can be clear around, like, I'm not absolving what everyone else is doing in that meeting, but I'm really focused on you, and because I'm vested in your development, right? And caring for you, quite frankly. I want to understand, like, what you think you can do that's in your control, and I want to support you in that. Okay. So I think asking questions, if you come to a place of really coaching, which is you're coaching somebody because, I know this is kind of woo-woo to say in the workplace, but you coach somebody because you care about the outcomes. You care about what's happening with them, right?
Yeah.
What's happening with them in that meeting. If you come from that place and from a place of curiosity, it's going to land very differently than if you come from a place of judgment, punitive, sort of, if I can do it, why can't you? Which is one of the
Yeah.
beliefs. You have to meet people where they are. That is the biggest thing from a leadership standpoint when you're trying to do this work with others.
So, a final topic then. Okay. So, towards the end of the book, obviously, there's the coaching piece to help others and the coaching sheets. But what I really want the listeners to understand is there's a such thing as corporate blockers then
Yeah,
that might be happening. It's that trickle down effect that might be
yeah,
happening, or those
yeah.
shared assumptions or shared beliefs. Can you talk through that to our listeners then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have chosen in my profession to work at an individual level. That said, I understand that, we all work within a system. We are the system, and if there's anyone who could say that they are the system, it's those who have, certain levels of quote unquote power within organizations, those who we tend to deem as the leaders, particularly
Yeah.
from a hierarchical standpoint. And so when we think about a culture organizationally, what is a culture? A culture is just a collective set of beliefs, right? They are the assumptions that we are making around how we operate, what it feels like to work here, or what we want it to feel like aspirationally. I think what there tends to be is some dissonance, and we hear this a lot of times, right? We hear, well, what are the unwritten rules? Like these might be the values that we put up on the poster, if folks do that these days, right? That we espouse at the town hall. But man, when I walk in here day to day, it's a very different energy that I feel, right? It doesn't feel collaborative. It doesn't feel innovative. It doesn't feel developmentally oriented. It doesn't feel work-life balance oriented. Well, why? Because underlying it are really actually some blockers that keep us from espousing the culture that we say we want, such as if you're saying you want to be an innovative organization, and yet people are not allowed to make, like there's a rampant belief of I can't make a mistake. Again, the math is not mathing. From an organizational standpoint, you're going to have to really assess that. Where does that come from? How do we change that collective belief that we can't make mistakes? And what I suggest is that if you want it to change at the collective level, you have to look at particularly where it originates from, which a lot of times it originates from the leaders, which kind of goes back to then the individual blockers. And leaders then tend to reinforce those collective beliefs with each other. So when I do work with a leadership team, we look to identify what are the collective beliefs that we hold as a leadership team, the collective blockers that we hold, and then do the work to same thing, to uncover them, unpack them, and then unblock from them as a team, and then figure out how do we do that with the rest of the organization, rather than jumping straight to we're going to implement this change initiative, and all of a sudden now we want everyone to be innovative, right? It doesn't work that way. You can put in the systems. I mean, you can put in the structures, you can put in, all the new actions, innovation day, whatever you want to call it. But if those underlying assumptions particularly from the top, and as it ripples down through management haven't changed, then that's where the breakdown happens. And I hear this happen over and over and over again, and really creates inefficiency within an organization, quite frankly.
Speaking of over and over again, this is a book that could be read over and over again. What a good book this is, Muriel. I have to say, I've highlighted so many different sections. As you see, I have a friend who teases me that I just stick in sticky notes at random places, which you can witness. I do not do that.
That is not true. I have been a witness.
And it has been so lovely to have you on the podcast today. Muriel, if people were to find out more about your brilliance and what you do, how might they do so?
Oh, thank you, William. So all of my information is at my website, murielwilkins.com. And that's where you can find anything from the book to the podcast to any of the group work that I do or individual work that I do. And then if they just want to connect with me, I'm available on LinkedIn at Muriel Mignon Wilkins or on Instagram at Coach Muriel Wilkins.
Muriel, thank you so much for joining the Workplace Podcast.
Of course. Thank you so much, William. It really was a pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. Thanks so much for listening to the Workplace Podcast. I really appreciate you being part of the conversation. If you found value in today's episode and want to support what we're building here, you'll find a link to our Patreon in the description. As a workplace expert, I'm here to help you resolve your workplace dilemmas. If your organization could benefit from my expertise, feel free to get in touch via our website, yellowwood.ie. Yellowwood, your external learning and development partner. Take a different path to success in your career, leadership, team, and organization. Until next time, take care, and we'll see you soon.